Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast. I am your host, Jen Washington. This is a weekly chat about socially conscious topics impacting the culture. I would like to extend my gratitude in you listening to this podcast. It means everything to me, and I hope it is clear that this subject matter is so important to me. I care about our people, our future, and making a positive change in this nation. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast. On this episode, we will be talking about the 1 year anniversary of the death of Breonna Taylor and the events that took place across the country to honor her. We will also talk about an update in the George Floyd case. Also, we will talk about the renewal of the Violence Against Women Act. Finally, we will talk about a story from my neck of the woods in St. Louis, Missouri, the tragic death of Roseanne McCulley. This is episode 39, aka Protect Black Women Still. March 13th marked the 1 year anniversary of the death of Breonna Taylor. Taylor was fatally shot in her Louisville, Kentucky apartment that evening of March 13th when plainclothes officers Jonathan Mattingly, Brett Hankinson, and Miles Cosgrove of the Louisville Metro Police Department forced their way into her apartment as a part of an investigation into a drug dealing operation. Let's listen to a clip.
An emotional day as hundreds gathered in downtown Louisville and across the country to honor the memory of Breonna Taylor. 1 year ago today, the 26-year-old was shot and killed by Louisville Metro police officers who executed a no-knock warrant and broke through her front door with a battering ram. Renewed calls for action 6 months after a grand jury declined to hold any of the officers directly responsible for Breonna's death. At today's rally, Hannah Drake, a local poet and activist, says this case has forever changed her.
I'm a mother of a daughter named Breonna, and I worry about her every day. I worry about myself every day. This city took something from me. It took something from Black people.
And Breonna Taylor's death has now transformed the city at large, leading Louisville to pass Breonna's Law, banning no-knock warrants, and a series of reforms addressing police-community relations. Tamika Palmer says the fight isn't over.
For me, it's still about these officers being arrested. It's still about somebody paying for the crimes that were committed against her.
So the fight continues, the struggle continues to try to get justice for Breonna Taylor. Her mother, Tamika Palmer, was out in Louisville on the day of the anniversary with the Until Freedom organization, with Tamika Mallory and that wonderful organization of activists, spreading the word, keeping everyone informed, and letting the authorities know that we are not satisfied and we will not rest until we get justice for Breonna Taylor. So I commend that organization and her mother and her efforts, but we do want to honor Breonna Taylor and look at some of the things that have come out of this movement. The clip from CBS mentioned that Breonna's Law was passed, and so that ends no-knock warrants in Louisville, Kentucky. So that's definitely, one stride in the right direction, and that was birthed out of the movement. Additionally, the city of Louisville agreed to pay the Breonna Taylor family a $12 million settlement. And so, of course, no amount of money can bring back your loved one. However, some small effort to try to provide some sort of comfort was extended. So they did have the settlement provided to the Taylor family. One of the officers were fired, and then Officer Brett Hankinson was charged with 3 counts of wanton endangerment for firing into the neighboring apartment. Additionally, all of the Louisville, Kentucky police officers now have to wear the body cameras. Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, has filed a federal lawsuit against the Louisville Metro Police Department and the officers involved in last year's fatal raid that seeks damages for violations of his constitutional rights, according to a lawsuit filed just last Friday. The lawsuit stems from the forced entry raid at Taylor's apartment on March 13th, 2020. Walker was arrested and charged with shooting at an officer on that day, but those charges were initially dismissed and then dismissed with prejudice permanently last week. So in this lawsuit, Walker's lawyers allege that the suit that the LMPD officers violated Walker's Fourth Amendment rights when they executed the search on Taylor's residence. So we will keep an eye on these new developments in this matter and see what will be the result. There was an update in the George Floyd case. The city of Minneapolis agreed to pay the estate of George Floyd $27 million after the city council agreed unanimously to settle a lawsuit with his family. Now, this news comes as the jury selection is underway for the trial of Derek Chauvin, a former Minneapolis police officer accused of killing the 46-year-old George Floyd in May of 2020 when he kneeled on his neck for almost 8 minutes. Chauvin has pled not guilty to second-degree unintentional murder and second-degree manslaughter charges. He also has pleaded not guilty to third-degree murder, which was reinstated in the case last week. This settlement is huge for the Floyd family, who has set up a foundation in his name and has committed themselves to the movement and improving policies and making change. Just days after Floyd's death, the Minneapolis City Council voted to ban chokeholds, requiring officers to report other officers they see using chokeholds and to intervene in such cases. So this is definitely a good thing, and the family has the right spirit and mind with wanting to impact change and create scenarios where this doesn't have to happen again. The House renews the Violence Against Women Act. Now, the Violence Against Women Act was a popular 1994 law that protected and provided resources for victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence. This reauthorization of the act is huge for women and for President Joe Biden, who was a part of the original bill as a senator during the 1990s. The provisions in the Violence Against Women Act include state grants for sexual assault and domestic violence services and offers housing assistance for victims of domestic abuse. So we see now more than ever that those types of resources for women experiencing violence, especially during the pandemic and during the current times, is needed definitely now more than ever. We just seen the tragic events occur in Atlanta, which I want to briefly talk about. Last Tuesday, there were a string of deadly shootings at 3 Atlanta area Asian spas. Robert Aaron Long, the suspect, has been taken into custody, and this tragic event left 8 people dead. 4 of them were Asian women. This is absolutely horrible. It definitely appears to be that the women were targeted because of their race, although the narrative in the media appears to be that it was more of a sexual type of motivation rather than a racial one. But there have been a string of crimes against Asian Americans in the news recently, as I'm sure we all have seen. So there's definitely, not a surprise, and it appears to be related and a motivation. And it's just really disheartening that this is still going on, that we're seeing these mass shootings and this white supremacy spirit, going around. It's just really disheartening. And we need a solution from our authorities, our leaders. Our thoughts and prayers are with the victims of this tragic event. We definitely stand with our Asian American family and, wish them recovery for this tragedy and all of the horrible events that have been going on recently in the news. Our last story that I want to share is one that comes from St. Louis, Missouri. Roseanne McCulley was a 34-year-old African American woman who lost her life at the hands of her husband. A really heartbreaking story. She had been experiencing domestic violence from her husband, and it escalated to the point where she lost her life, as well as her 13-year-old son and her 6-year-old daughter. Left their 1-year-old daughter that they shared together unharmed, and took that child to a family member's house before he took his own life after killing the family members. She had posted about the abuse that she was experiencing, and it just really broke my heart to hear about that. I did not know her personally, but we shared a lot of mutual friends, and she's from my part of town here in St. Louis, and so I just really wanted to share this story and hope that it may spark some interest in someone who knows someone that's going through this, and just be there for each other, guys. Like, we need our brothers to protect us. We need our sisters to stand with other sisters going through something like this. And it appears, according to the statistics I'm seeing online, that abuse against women and children are becoming more prominent during this pandemic. And this is related to the Violence Against Women Act we just talked about. There are resources available out here, the hotline.org, starttherest.org. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is the one with the hotline.org. So there's just so many places that are out here and available. So if someone is going through something, reach out and don't just suffer in silence. This show is dedicated to Roseanne McCulley and her children who lost their life this month, Women's History Month. And we honor you and rest in power. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and conclude this episode. I would again like to thank you for listening to Woke by Accident, and we would also like to invite you to follow us on our social media. On Instagram, it is Woke by Accident Podcast, and on Twitter, it is Woke by. Again, we are available on all the platforms for podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, share, like. Tell a friend. We do appreciate the feedback and the support. And every time you listen, we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again and take care.